Hello, I'm Dave Purnell, and today we're talking about something that's become a bit of a buzzword in manufacturing at the moment, and that's the concept of servitization. Now, building a service package around your core product isn't something new. In fact, Rolls-Royce have been invoicing their jet engines based on how much you use them for about 50 years. But new affordable technology means that you no longer have to be a Rolls-Royce or a Siemens to adopt a servitization business model. In fact, we're now seeing smaller SME manufacturers starting to develop innovative new ways of selling what they make, sometimes to the point where what you make actually becomes secondary to the benefit the customer is paying for. So, to explore more about what servitization is and how we can embrace it, earlier I spoke with business growth expert Mark Prince about how a manufacturing company can start their servitization journey. Well, hello Mark, and thank you for joining us today. Servitization. Now, in manufacturing, there always seems to be the next big thing. So we've had lean manufacturing, we've had just on time. So just so that we're all clear, what actually are we meaning when we say servitization?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say, Dave, is I hate the word servitization to start off with. In terms of messing the English language up, it's done a great job. But actually, servitization has been all around us for decades and many years, but primarily what we're talking about is people who don't sell a product, but instead they sell the outcome of that product or a service to their customers. Yeah. So, if we think today about our broadband, for example, in our homes, we don't buy a router. We certainly don't buy the wires that are delivered under the ground that comes to our house. Actually, we don't even buy broadband. What we buy is the ability to access the internet, or the access for our televisions to work from it, and that type of thing. So that is servitization. The BT are selling us a service, not those products. And we've got them all around us the whole time. The issue now is that traditional manufacturing companies selling what could be referred to as traditional products actually can use those models to make competitive advantage and to make an awful lot more money for themselves.
So what we're talking is actually people buying an outcome rather than a product. So if we bring that back to manufacturing, one example I've heard used very well was take a mousetrap manufacturer. I'm sure you've heard this one too. So in the past there were two ways of improving your business and getting a competitive advantage. You could have either made the world's best mousetrap, make it better than your competitors, or you could have made it a lot cheaper than your competitors. And so now we're talking about a third way, which is actually selling what you could call a mouse-free environment.
Yeah, and what always amazes me when people do that study, which I've read on numerous occasions in different things, is why nobody then goes on to mention Rentokil. Rentokil have been providing that service for decades, and in the doing so, turn themselves into a household brand and a phenomenally successful financial company. Now, they never sold, you rightly say, they never sold you the mousetrap or indeed tried to make a better one. They didn't even sell you man hours. What they sold you was a pest-free environment that you paid for on a monthly contract. And in doing so, their task became to make themselves as efficient as possible in providing that environment by deploying technology, the best tools, and being generally incredibly efficient. So they took the mousetrap and servitized it an awful long time ago.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about servitization, even though you hate the word, you hate the term, we quite often are talking about these larger companies. So again, Rolls-Royce, most people know about how they sell jet engines. It's powered by the hour, is I think celebrating its 50th year this year. So why is servitization now becoming something that smaller SME manufacturers are starting to consider?
Well, first of all, they are obviously following the examples of companies like Rolls-Royce, and the academic literature is driving them towards that type of thing. But also they're looking at subscription models that are much more prevalent in the normal environment, and deciding that if they could have a piece of that for themselves, life would be so much better. But the thing that's facilitating that throughout is technology. So if you can imagine selling a machine to an industrial company in the past, perhaps selling it into another continent, the idea of saying to that person, don't pay me for it up front, but just pay me every time you use it for an hour, pay me for it, and don't worry, I'll trust you to tell me when you've used it, is a step far too far.
You just couldn't have done it.
No, but modern technology now enables you to implant really small devices the size of a mobile phone that, first of all, can track how much that machine is actually being used. And then you can wrap that in a whole series of services. So you can say to yourself, in knowing how long it's been used, I can predict when it's going to wear out, or I can say when it's going to be maintained, or I can talk about any number of things that can add value to that machine over and above that I originally had. But then also, technology now is so sophisticated that you can tell those sensors inside those machines to directly bill the host company and actually directly extract money from its account into you if you choose to do. So technology now has enabled us to build in the facility to trust our customer, and I use that word trust in a very loose phrase, but it's enabled us to be able to check on that and effectively invoice as the product is being used in a way that we never could before.
Yeah, so actually selling the product itself is no longer the end of it. It can change your whole financial model of how you work as well.
And it changes it dramatically, because once you're selling a service, then the idea of trying to work out how much a product costs becomes irrelevant. Now it's the value that you're offering a client in the whole compared with the value that somebody else can offer. So it's no longer comparing two products, one directly with the other. It's comparing a package of products. And what's more, if it's being done as charging for people over a long period of time, now all of a sudden the value of money comes into things, and the ability for companies to afford to buy the asset versus buying the service comes into it. So it's changed the dynamics completely.
So you're no longer taking the cost of manufacturing and adding your margin on. It's a lot about actually selling that value to the end user, isn't it? Yeah.
In fact, the cost of the product becomes actually quite insignificant in the scheme of things. It's much more about the cost of the added services on, and the length of time the product is going to last for, and when it might need replacing. Those issues become much more powerful. The concept of warranty, for example, then goes out of the window because you're providing the service to the client and committing to do so forever. So it's an issue of effective longevity rather than warranty in the breakdown. So it affects everything right the way through the offer.
Yeah, and you mentioned this word trust earlier as well, because if I'm selling a service, I can't just call up my largest client and say, I now want you to start paying me monthly, quarterly, or how you use something for something which I was selling you before. And if you're selling someone a product, the person can evaluate that very easily. They can hold it in their hand. They know what they're getting. Services are a lot more intangible. So how do you take that to your customer base?
Well, you used the word trust in there, but actually when it comes down to business, there is relatively little in the sense of pure trust. But what there is the sense of mutual benefit. So if you can explain and explore with your customer a way to solve his problems, a way to give him solutions that he didn't previously have, and in the doing of it, give him benefit, and also in the doing of it, create a competitive advantage for yourself in terms of a recurring income stream or an entrenched position in that customer, then people over time will begin to refer to that as trust. But what it actually is a sense of entwined mutual benefit. If both parties are getting real benefit from a relationship, then you can rely on it continuing on further than a standard product buying one. And if you want to call that trust, that's fine, because you can then trust in your future income and trust in that you're not going to lose a client and trust in the ability to get future revenues. But actually what it is that sense of entwined mutual benefit.
Absolutely. And so we're talking there about developing things in partnership quite often with the people that you're supplying. So it moves beyond that of just becoming a customer and a supplier. You're working in partnership with that company.
Absolutely. I mean, the single biggest thing in deploying servitization well, and doing so to create a competitive advantage for yourself and extra value for your customer, is knowing your customer exceptionally well and knowing how they use your product, the product that you previously provided to them. Once you understand that, then you can, in fact, knowing them better than perhaps they know themselves, then you can begin to build service packages around that can offer and can give that sense of mutual benefit.
Absolutely, because I think when somebody's buying a product from you, they're sometimes looking to solve a far bigger problem, not actually buying that one thing that they're buying from you sometimes.
Yes, and sometimes that they are not even trying to, they don't know the problem that they're trying to solve. They don't know that they've got the issue because they've lived with it for so long. and they don't know that it's possible to buy the facility to create a solution as opposed to buying an individual product.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best examples of that is the companies that deal with waste management from restaurants. When Winnow is the prime leader in that, when you look at the way they do that, they are effectively creating a solution in waste management for commercial kitchens rather than selling them a bin with the weighing scales on it. And those type of models that we have are actually, and examples can be taken and extrapolated to numerous companies that that we come into contact with every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to end on this though, so we're talking about what servitization is and how you can develop with your customers. However, I think one of the biggest problems whenever you're implementing any strategy into a business, and especially manufacturing businesses, is we quite often have change-resistant cultures. And something like servitization, it's going to affect your entire business. It's going to affect every department from product development, even right through to HR, because sometimes you don't actually have the skills within the business to implement this. So how do you overcome those cultural challenges as well?
Well, not only is it cultural challenges, Dave, but it's also understanding challenges from the top, the top level as to how to deploy that. So, it builds all the way down the company. How do you get excited about the fact you sold a contract for 4 years for, let's say, £100 a month instead of having sold a product for £10,000? You have to build that excitement into your company. How do you get your sales teams looking for opportunities to partner with your customers? How do you get your product designers to think about longevity and effectiveness in use instead of features and benefits that can be sold? How do you get your finance teams to think about future revenues and how to recognize profit in those and the cash flow implications of that versus the idea of buying stock and selling stock on? It comes down all the way through a business, and the clarity of strategy that has to be to go with this and the clarity of implementation programs needs to be exceptionally well thought out and exceptionally well understood if you're really going to get the best benefit from it. But the companies that do are doing really well and transforming themselves from quite traditional manufacturing organizations into ones with radically different revenue streams and higher values for their company. Because when you come to try and sell a company or you try and have it valued for whatever reason, if you give someone a future revenue stream that is guaranteed rather than a past sales stream that you think you can probably grow out there, the value in that company is huge by comparison.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a very important point that we overlook, because as we said earlier, you might have to recruit from outside your normal gene pool, as it were, to implement some of this. You might have to bring in some outside skills or retrain current staff.
Indeed. What you certainly have to do is implant different thinking processes, whether that comes by bringing people in from outside, whether it brings in from bringing a team in initially to help you set something up, whether it comes from just having to go through a series of training programs upon training programs, and maybe customer study programs where you look for these opportunities with your prime customers. But what it certainly is a way of thinking about things differently rather than something that gets originated in the marketing department, because that just doesn't work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Mark. And if you want to know more about servitization, then we have a very good guide on our website. Or if you just want to continue the conversation with Mark and myself, you can also get in touch with us there as well. Thank you, Mark.
Cheers, Dave.